Welcome to Steve and Bobby Show. My name is Steve Williams, and guess who is back?
Oh, come on. I went on vacation for 1 week.
Bobby Bleer2 is here today, ladies and gentlemen. He likes to leave me all by myself sometimes.
He does good, though. You do great, buddy. You do good.
No, we miss you, Bobby, man. We appreciate you here, brother. So, in our continuous coverage in talking about some of the issues that are going on in a lot of the protests that are going on. Actually, to this day, I think we're at 83 or 84 days of protests going on across the country. I know it doesn't have the news media's attention as much, but there are protests going on. Last week, we had Cher Burn on, who was explaining to us some of the issues that were going on in Portland, Oregon, and she gave us some really good insight of what's going on the trench level. And that's kind of like what we want to do here.
Good job, by the way, Steve.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
And it was good to have her on. If you guys didn't see the show, just check on Mad Talk TV shows. You'll find the other show at Steve and Bobby Show. Yeah. That was done last week. Good show.
Please make sure you tune in, because that's what we try to do here is we try to get on the trench level. We want to know exactly what's going on the ground. We don't want to hear what local politicians are saying. We want to hear what the people that are actually protesting are saying, because those are the things that are important. At least to me, they are. And today we are actually kind of lucky. We got a well. First, let's talk about the situation in Texas, in Austin. Austin is probably it's one of those little thorns in Texas because it's a very liberal city. It's about 76% Democratic favorable city, which is very unusual in the city of or in the state of Texas, right? Thanks to Governor Abbott and his craziness that goes on over there. But the point here is, it's a very vocal city. When there are situations that occur, usually Austin, when it comes to Texas, Austin's one of those cities that will voice. They're a very boisterous city. And we are lucky today to have the co-president of Jutice America of the Austin chapter, Eric Lee Brown. Let's bring him on. There he is.
What's going on?
Mr. Brown, what's going on, man?
Welcome to the show.
Not much.
So, Eric, man, like we were saying, I think there's a lot of things that are going on in Austin, of course. I mean, I've been following the Austin situation just as well as the Portland situation. Including the Garrett situation that's going on, and I know you were friends with Garrett, and we'll get into that in a little bit. First, what I want to do is I want to introduce our audience to you with your. I think was it a forum that you guys had with the police chief there, Brian Manley?
So what we did initially was have like a meeting with him, a closed door meeting, and then had a press conference to talk about the changes that we had made from that meeting. Okay,
so let's go to the video of Mr. Brown at this presser. Take a listen.
So every day across this great nation, people of color are faced with issues that plague our communities. We're told that we must lift ourselves up by the bootstraps, but the reality is that the oppressive system established has never been fully destroyed. And now is the time that we make the change. We're removing the cornerstones of racism across the United States and abroad, brick by brick. Our faces are not important. My face is not important, and every individual's face up here, part of our organization, is not important. Our message is, we abolish the system of injustice, but instead seek justice. We speak out against division, but embrace one another in unity. We no longer hurt in silence, but find sanctuary in our continual fight. We don't solve issues with issues. We seek trust within our communities.
Okay, so I want to kind of introduce our audience to you. That's why that's kind of important. Now, in your own words, Jutice America, what is Jutice America, and where are you guys at presently?
Yeah, so Jutice America is really I guess, social coalition of individuals who came together from the protests, who were out there protesting peacefully, who have like different set of skills. So we have an individual, my other co-president, Michael Burnett, who specializes in mental health and addiction recovery. Myself coming from the background of working on Capitol Hill with lobbying and things like that previously. We have another guy who's our vice president, Sekou Ahmed Toure III, who is actually the grandson of Sekou Ahmed Toure, who led the revolution in Guinea. So we have all of these different individuals who came together and said, hey, I have this set of skills. How can we influence the change that we want to see in our communities here?
I'm sorry.
And kind of where we are now no, you're fine. Where we are now is kind of like analyzing everything step by step, because what's happening on the ground is ever changing. It's ever changing. So, 1 minute you have one situation and the next minute you have another situation. So you have to address those, situations differently. And that's kind of where we are now, just navigating our way through this space to be able to affect that change.
What is that space geographically? You mentioned in your speech, you're talking about, across this nation, we're addressing these issues and removing racism brick by brick. I love that. Wondering, as you guys are addressing issues, are you taking calls and helping the community in Austin, in Texas, or across this nation?
Right. So what we've noticed is that in the protest, everything is becoming very localized to the geographic area, and that there's no unity amongst the different cities, right? You have this city who's doing this city who's doing that. And so when at our foundation, we said, are we just Austin or are we just America? Because this is something that we want to, affect nationally. 1 second, buddy. Sorry, I got two sets of
Don't worry about it. We all got kids.
And so, it was saying, okay, is this just an Austin problem, as a lot of people would like to believe, or is this actually a national problem? And so we have a chapter that we're working on in Tennessee. And we start with the small things, small changes that we can affect. And we've had people that have called us and say, hey. We've had people who say, I'm interested in, having this changed in my city. And I'm interested in having this changed in my city. And we come together and say, okay, based on our set of skills, how can we facilitate change that you want to see?
So, I see these groups. I'm impressed, because I'm not from the Austin area, and seeing some of the Austin of what's going on. I get what I get from the national news, just like anybody else, and that's why it's good to talk to somebody that's on the ground there. And but when I went and looked at your, because you actually, like you said earlier, you had an indoor closed door meeting with the chief of police, Brian Manley, right?
Correct.
Now, in the indoor negotiations that you guys talked about, and in the presser, was there a difference in the way the police chief presented it? Like, did he give?
Oh, of course.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask.
Of course.
Was the persona different?
So
I'll give you this, and this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course. So this is pretty much how it went. I'll just break it down how the conversation went for you guys. So when we went in, we knew that. Well, first, let me back up. The position that we took was to not say that we were against Austin Police Department, nor say that we were for Austin Police Department. And the reason why that was because you had every black group in every organization within Austin saying F the police, right? Obviously, where we stand at is we don't agree with the system of policing, right? But in the same instance, when you have an individual who's driving down the street and they decide to, aim a gun out of their window and kill individuals, obviously that we need someone who's going to be able to handle that situation, right? So we didn't make any position. And by doing so, we knew that Austin Police Department would have no choice but to talk to us after their numerous failed presser attempts. So they to give people free cookies at the protest, and that was a fail. They got thank you cards, which were all written in the same handwriting, which was a fail for them. So they needed someone. They did kneel. Unfortunately, there was another group that was localized. I think we'll talk about that later. But there was another group that was against 100%, and they didn't want anything to do with that. And so we took this position. I tell people it's kind of like psychological proxy war in a sense. We just stayed the neutral ground and was able to infiltrate APD and say, hey, look, now here's the changes that we want to make. But you have to, because the people want to hear what it is that you have to say. They need to hear you. Brian Manley, you have not spoken to the people, and we're going to give you that opportunity to. And so we chose something with the kneeling on the neck that we knew APD was not going to be able to uphold, and that it would bring the entirety, because we captured a lot of people who were afraid to speak out against APD, but they agreed with what we were saying and the changes that needed to be made. They didn't necessarily say anything about Brian Manley. And so by creating that accountability, when it happened again, all those moderates, I would say, that we captured, they had to shift their position, because if the one black group that was willing to APD, was pretty much discredited with the fact that they couldn't uphold their end of the bargain, it just goes to show that they're incompetent.
So you had specific demands, right? You guys were pretty specific. So we can actually go into, because I'm kind of interested as to what the local politician or the local population there thinks about your group. I want to go into the KTVU, which is your local TV station, and their story that they did on you. Let's do that real quick.
Just America. It's a group that pretty much came together this week. You may recognize the name because it already had a press conference with the Austin police chief where the group called for more accountability
that plague our communities.
So how did this group even start?
We were all peaceful protesters, who would go from one location to another. And we realized that in a majority of the protests, there was almost a lack of direction for the next steps after the protest.
Eric Brown is the co-president of Just America, a group of once strangers now all working together.
This was simply someone saying, I feel like I can do this, I feel like I can do this, and I can do this, and grouping together each one of our skills and talents to be able to affect change.
And that doesn't stop with one press conference with Chief Brian Manley. In fact, the group is calling for another meeting next week. Brown says they'll ask for 4 more things: a no-knock warrant ban, monthly town hall meetings, disarming of officers in non-critical positions, and reallocation of budget funds back into the predominantly African-American east side of Austin.
So now I guess my next question following this is, what does the local population of Austin feel, not only about your organization, but the Black Lives Matter movement there and the protests in general?
So I feel like there's this overwhelming sense of what do we do as a community, right, within Austin. And the unfortunate part is when you begin discussing what do we do as a community in Austin, you're really localizing that idea to the 92% of white Americans who live within Austin, right? And so their needs and their ideas of what needs to happen, and it doesn't necessarily all reflect the remaining, 8% of African Americans who live in, Austin city limits, right? And so there is this, first, to talk about the changes with the Black Lives Matter movement. I believe that people generally accept the idea that Black Lives Matter, right? Because we've stated time and time again, hey, look, we're not the organization, but now this is a movement where anyone is invited to that movement so long as they believe that Black Lives Matter. The other side to that, though, is you have people who say, well, Black Lives Matter, but also we need to talk about this ideology and we need to talk about this ideology. And none of those are truly representative of the issues that plague Black communities directly. And now it's almost an infiltration, say, of ideology.
So, okay, so this is very interesting because you're not the only one I've heard this of. I've been when we talked off off camera as well, she was expressing to me the fact of agitators that are infiltrating within a lot of these organizations like Black Lives Matter movements that are causing ruckus and chaos within those organizations or doing stuff in front of cameras to make it look bad. Is that what you're seeing there as well?
Yeah. 100%. We're hearing, for example, there's an organization, or I should say a group of people, as they like to be called, who don't necessarily have members, but just supporters, who are speaking about Maoism and Leninism. And it's like this blend of Leninism, Maoism, and Marxism, right? And so you bring to the table this conversation of like, are we going to the fact that Mao Zedong killed over roughly 60 million people during the Great Leap Forward, right? So that's a whole nother ideology that's being pushed. People are taking it in because it's revolutionary in their mindset, right? And people are just looking for something to stand behind that's going to upheave this system that's in place. And so they're falling for anything.
Oh, I see. So you're saying there's different types of political ideology that are infiltrating the Black Lives Matter movement?
Yeah.
Right. There's a
Of
lot
course,
of folks that take
of course.
advantage, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I see a lot of people trying to take advantage of the attention that the Black Lives Matter movement is getting. And so some folks will come in under this umbrella, we've talked about this before, and push something that sounds kind of good, but takes away from the results that we are actually wanting through this movement. Right, and that's
Right.
how I see it. And other folks will come in under an umbrella like saying, "Hey, Black Lives Matter. We need to do this, but we also need to do these things." That doesn't help push the agenda or the goals that we are actually trying to achieve through this movement right now. And
Right.
I see a lot of that happening. People kind of hijacking this movement for their own purposes.
Yeah, I just
We're talking
recently
more about
saw
the agitators.
Yeah, agitators.
You're
within-
talking about the people who are trying to make this have a bad thing in a way, like you said. Some folks are trying to make this into a communist thing, into something else that's different. We had folks here, Eric, in Fresno, that during the protests that were happening here, eventually someone was hosting a protest saying, "Let's show them Caucasian," on the flyer, says, "Let's show them Caucasians, what we're about," or something. You could totally tell it did not come from anybody else. They were going to totally.
They were probably white.
Well, it came out that, we kind of know who these groups were. There just wasn't any absolute proof. But
Yeah.
that's what people are doing all over the place. And then, you're witnessing it there, too.
Yeah.
And so I kind of want to put up a remark that you had said, because we were talking about closed door meetings and outdoor meetings with the police chief there, Brian Manley. So I kind of want to put, you released this to the press back in up in Austin. I think this was June 16th, where you mentioned that after talks with Chief Manley and his team, Jutice America was able to address issues within the department regarding accountability in the language. Jutice America has maintained a middle strategic ground as means of exposure. We have faced tremendous backlash from the community regarding our organization. In reality, the entirety of our strategy will be revealed here today. We have attempted to establish communication with Manley's office again. Unfortunately, our demands are no longer being met. This entire situation has been a tough journey for us. However, in the face of criticism, we remain strong and remain true to our plan. So my question to you is, what are we in? August what? Are we in August?
13?
August 13th. This was a little over a month or under a month ago, right? Have you
Right.
been able to contact Chief Brian Manley of the Austin Police Department?
So we did have a meeting that came directly after that.
Okay.
And the reason being is because, again, once that final group that they could not work with, was no longer being listened to, it put an entirety of pressure on the APD. So literally that day after that statement came out, I got a message from their assistant police chief like, "Hey, we're trying to schedule the meeting. We've been trying to get in contact with you guys," which wasn't the case. And we want to schedule this next meeting. So at that next meeting, they had the fool that is King Cassidy, the president of the Austin Police Association, along with all these different members from like the Strategic Task Force and all of these different groups. But Chief Brian Manley was unable to make that meeting because he had other matters that he had to attend to that were more important than addressing the issues of the community.
So let's talk about the mayor, Steve Adler, right? That's your mayor there, Steve Adler?
Yeah.
What is the situation with the mayor?
I mean, he's inefficient, honestly. He's a placeholder right now for whoever needs to use him. So whether that be Austin Police Department, whether that be the city council members who are extremely moderate, not all of them, Greg Cesar, fantastic guy. Today, actually, he was just able to really push for APD to be defunded by $100 million. So there's that. But he's really just a placeholder for anyone who needs to use him. He's not necessarily doing anything for the city of Austin. We were having an issue with evictions regarding, and he was still requesting that evictions be made and that people were still required to pay, the exorbitant amount of rent that is in Austin.
Okay, so how about your governor, Greg Abbott? Has there been anything from the governor's office?
So I would compare Greg Abbott to almost Darth Vader. And the reason for that being is because he has so much power and ability to really affect the changes that need to be done in Austin. However, I feel as if his own pride, his own ego, his own need to really show his pride and his, strength towards the Trump campaign and, towards his constituents who are also Trump supporters, that his best bet for him in his mind is just not to do anything, and just allow those people to make the decisions as to what happens in Texas. Now, again, like you said, Austin is really an anomaly when it comes to Texas. So everything that happens outside of Austin is really Abbott's, I guess, hunting ground. However, in Austin, there's a lot of pushback on what Abbott says.
Yeah, it's one of the most progressive cities in the country. A lot of people don't realize it, and it's in Texas.
Okay, so that's kind of have you don't realize Austin's in Texas, but have you ventured outside of Austin with protests or trying to talk to other police chiefs or other city councils to kind of continue the same? What is that like? How is that completely different or the same as Austin?
Completely different. Yeah. Completely different. And I'll tell you exactly why. And this is something that we had a hard time understanding because we went to Dyersburg, Tennessee, in Jackson, Tennessee, and held rallies out there. And we had people say, "Oh my God, thank you for coming out. We needed some sort of direction. We needed some sort of plan of action for us to be able to move forward." And these people were receptive. And that's not only on, the side of the African Americans that are within those cities, but also the Trump supporters are completely different. They're completely different. And I'll give you an example. We went out there for a rally where we were trying to have a Confederate statue removed. Not that we were going out there to tear the statue down, burn the statue down, any of that, but just to have a conversation. And we started off with saying, hey, we're in West Tennessee. Like this battle of Shiloh, which this statue was erected for, this area fought for the Union. So if you're trying to protect your heritage, the more logical thing to do would be to put a Union soldier there. And they're like, well, we're trying to, protect history and make sure that history doesn't get muddied and all of these different things. Well, I asked one of the ladies, I said, how hard would it be to add a Union soldier with the Confederate soldier to show the entirety of the history? And she's like, man, that's a fantastic idea. I never thought about that. Now, of course, I posed the question that in doing so, you would have to show the Confederate soldier dying in that moment because that would really show the entirety of history, right? But she was completely receptive to it. And one thing that we've been pushing is that there are a lot of people out there, even on the Black Lives Matter side, who are completely illiterate in what is happening in America and the changes that need to be made. They're also on the side of the Trump supporters, the far-right conservatives, right? There's some people who believe these rhetorics and these ideologies, but necessarily don't have an understanding of them. So we need to have conversation first, so that way we can do two things. One, we can understand the perspective of the people who say that they hate us. And two, we can really let them know how we feel about what they're saying, and it exposes what they truly believe. You just have to let people talk.
Yeah, they said I had this. I mean, there's no hint as to where I fall politically, and I said the best bet to fight Trump is just to let him talk, and you just don't say nothing.
Yeah, he runs himself because well, if you don't say nothing, he gets mad because he ain't getting no attention.
He gets mad.
But in this particular case, Eric, if I know, looking at time and time may be running out, but I just wanted to make sure that I was able to say this. In all the fights and everything that you're doing, I'm glad you're getting these conversations, and I'm glad people may be receptive in certain areas and go, "Oh, wow, that sounds great." We're looking for something. A lot of times that becomes the dog and pony show kind of answer to make it look like they are trying to work with you and talk with you. I mean, you were able to use that to get into Austin, to the APD. When you're going out there and talking with other folks, or you're giving advice to other folks to continue this fight in their communities, make sure that they hold these people accountable to the ideals and things that they're going to look forward to. If they want to put another union soldier up, and then there's a next step after that, they got to have the conversation about putting the union soldier up. They can't just come back and say, "Oh yeah, we decided not to. It's an expense." Like, they have to have real conversations about what's going to happen to move to the next step. And that's what I feel that a lot of our groups that have been advocating for social justices kind of get to that talking point and think it's success just because they were able to talk to folks. We need now results. Result. And that's all it's about, producing results and making sure that we move forward. The dog and pony shows need to quit. They need to stop.
Yeah, because it takes in the streamlined, plan that we've been following is first that conversation, and then action, and then change. That's the only way that anything is going to get accomplished right now. And with everything that's happening in Texas, Austin specifically, even across the United States, I found that the biggest threat to the Black Lives Matter movement right now is not necessarily the Trump supporters, but it is the extremely moderate liberals, who have really taken a hold of things, because we explained that hey, Black people have, we fought in every single social issue because our issues are represented in every issue. So we have people in the African American community who are LGBTQ, right? So we fought at Stonewall, right? Made sure that we showed up and showed out. But every time that the issue of what Black people feel in America, Black and brown, it's always overridden by someone else's ideology. And we really have to make sure that protecting our interests, because there's no way that anyone is going to accept any ideology within the Black Lives Matter movement from someone who's part of the Trump organization. It's just not going to happen. You have these subsets of people who kind of fade out into those other groups, but they leave the movement, right? They're never accepted back into the movement. However, you have these people who look like they're your friends, and they have your best interests at heart, and they hijack things.
That's the word, hijack. That's kind of what I was saying earlier. But that is exactly what we have to be able to move and hold people accountable. I'd love for more young people to run and go beyond just advocating, but actually legislating and making changes to these rules. But to me, this is a human issue. It's always been a human issue. It's about treating people right. It's about creating real opportunity for everybody. It is not a left or right issue. It's an American issue that we have to address. But the longer and the more power we give to politicians to hold these as dog and pony shows, just saying, "Oh, I talked with this group and I got the endorsement of this group," but when they get into office and they don't work as hard as they said that they would towards our issues that we bring up, that we hold them accountable to, that we actually have to get rid of them. We can't keep pushing them. We got to find people to get in that are going to continue to fight for this. That's what I believe is very, very important. And that's why I say these groups that we get started, that they have to continue. You got to keep pushing them and holding everybody absolutely accountable. Like you said, from across the nation, brick by brick, we're attacking racism, we're removing pieces of racism. The same thing as we are going for new legislation, new policies to make things more equal for everybody. We're going city by city or community by community, but it cannot stop.
It can't.
Well, Eric, man, I really appreciate, and I'm going to I want to extend our show too, as well as you later in the future, because I'm actually kind of curious as to what happens in the future. Maybe 6 months down the line, we can bring you back on the show, and you can kind of tell us where you guys are at and some of the, some of the.
I'll give you the overall plan. The next steps for us, one, we're trying to affect the Texas Penal Code in 2021. As Austin is, specific, we are, trying to make sure that APD, the charter, is put by the council, and that it's not just this rogue agency who can, accept all these different, ideas from CLEAT and all these different places. And then one thing that I want to be sure that people understand is, yes, this is an American issue. We primarily with this in America because of the history. However, there are other groups of affected people in the entirety of the world that also deal with these same issues simply because of the color of their skin and their, ethnic background. For example, like the Sahrawis in Western Sahara with the Moroccan. And so we need to not only address this issue here in America, but take it to the United Nations as a human rights issue.
Do you want to tell us your because I know you guys have a website. I just want you to if you want to tell us what your website address, and we'll put that also too. We'll put that as well. But if you want to tell us your website.
Yep, our website is justamerica2020.org. You can go on there, find pretty much what all of our strategic priority areas are, what our mission statement, our vision statement is. And then as we have events, we post more events on there. In the coming times, we're also developing what's called the Black and Brown People's Liberation Credo, not manifesto, but credo. And so that'll pretty much, right. So that'll pretty much be just the, points, the strategic points that we have and how we plan on affecting that change within each one of those areas.
So before I let you go here, I want one thing. What is the one change that you believe APD is absolutely going to do or have to do that probably the next time when we get to talk, you guys will have that accomplished?
Well, I think it's really right now, I think people believe that we're in the center of this revolution, right? That we're at this midway point. And I cannot stress enough that this is the precursor to the actual movement. So right now, I think what you're going to see from us moving forward is gaining support on ground level, more supporters who are actually willing to come out and do the work and really hit this things from a grassroots initiative type feel. And that'll be what propels our specific agenda forward in the coming times.
Okay.
All right. Oh, shoot. I appreciate you. I mean, shoot, we're already hitting it. We went over what we said we were going to do. But this is great information. This is important stuff. And this is why talking to local leaders is important, especially in the show that we do, because we really, really want to know at the ground and trench levels what's going on. It's very important to know that. It's important. Now, before I leave, and I did say I was going to mention this.
Garrett Foster.
Yes. I want to talk about Garrett Foster really quick because I think this is really, really important. This is something that's been flagged over because of the presidential election. It was a big deal prior to this. Where are we at? I know you were a personal friend of Mr. Garrett, so I understand that, right? I understand that correctly?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
within the protest.
Within the protest movement, yes. So where is that at? Is there justice being made, or because this was an active duty sergeant soldier that actually shot him, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Where are we at on that?
Yes. Nowhere. So APD is completely in the middle of what they call an investigation. However, releasing him immediately after the shooting shows where their standpoint is on it. I've seen countless videos. So I was standing right next to Garrett when he got shot. I was also one of the first people to run to his body. He was shot. And I've seen videos where they're saying that, Garrett had his weapon high. I'm not sure if anybody, especially the agent that was in the vehicle, who doesn't understand what low ready means. And when you have a vehicle that is attempting to run through protesters, I myself, being a veteran, would also be at the low ready because, the times that we're in. And the APD is not doing anything about it. And I honestly believe that no one's going to do anything about it.
And I want to tell our viewers as well, when we're talking to Mr. Brown, just like Cher Byrne last week, who was a veteran as well. She's an Army veteran as well. Eric Brown is a veteran. He's a U.S. veteran of the United States Army. So we appreciate your service and appreciate what you're doing. It's leaders like you in the local Austin area, and actually nationally, we need leaders like you to promote what you're doing in order to advance the agenda that is so important, especially when we're talking about police brutality and some of the issues that are happening at the local level. Eric Brown, man, I appreciate you, brother, for real.
Thank you both guys for having me here. Rest in peace to Garrett Foster, for Whitney Foster, hero of the people. Thank you guys for having me on.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you. All right.
Appreciate you, man.
You take care.
Thank you.
We'll catch up.
So socially and social justice at the local level is absolutely the most important thing that we can do. And that's why we're getting in contact with as many local leaders as we can, leaders like Eric Brown and Cher Byrne, and we're going to have a couple more of local leaders. I have some on the agenda to that way we can, I really want to know what's going on, man, at that level.
Right, because all we get to see is what media tells us what's going on in different places, but not to hear what's going on from the horse's mouth.
That's right.
To understand how they are similar and to understand how they're different, and hopefully to show people where we need to be united in order to have this movement go through.
And they're really receptive too, and when you reaching out to them, and we're not just throwing political stuff at them, because I don't know where these people fall politically. I have no idea on some of these people that I talk to, but I just want an honest assessment. Hey, what's going on in Portland? What's going on in Austin? Hopefully, what's going on in Seattle? And I want to know. And I actually want to know what's going on in these red states. Tennessee right now, Nashville, just had a protest last night. So I want to talk to local leaders there. I want to find out what's going on in that area too, because that stuff's important, bro. It's important. It's good to know, and it's good to, just to figure these things out, man. I really, 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 really enjoyed that conversation.
Yeah,
I did.
It was good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys very much for tuning in. Please make comments. These are the first two times now.
Yeah, two parts.
That we've brought some guests in, and we really do enjoy it. But let us know what you think. Let us know who you might like us to have on the show. And ple's be real about it. I'm not going to be able to get Biden on the show.
Biden ain't going to come and talk to us. Sure, he don't even go to MSNBC. What you talking about?
But let us know your thoughts. Please check out our other shows at Mad Talk TVs. We're shooting out of Fresno, California. Thank you very much. We'll catch you on the flip side.